Hello everyone and welcome back to this last lecture on joins. In this lecture we are going to discuss on self-join. Back in time when I was learning the SQL fundamentals and I was learning different type of joins, I have struggled the most learning this self-join. And in my experience, for 2 interviews for a product-based company, the interviewer asked multiple questions based on self-join. Even after me explaining different kind of joins like inner join, outer join, left join, right join, they still wanted a brief explanation on self-join. So by the end of this lecture, you will have a complete idea that what is a self-join and how does it work and what is the proper syntax to write a self-join query. So without any further delay, let's jump into our PG admin tool. Alright, so for this lecture, I did not use this practice database where the information from DVD rental database is restored. Instead, I have used this learning database that I had created to create new tables inside it. And for this lecture, I have created this new students table. I have used 3 different columns here. First is student ID, second is student name, and also I have decided to assign one buddy to each and every student. So each and every student will have a buddy ID which will correspond to a different student. It will make more sense once we see the details from the table. And also using this insert command, I am adding 8 new records to the newly created table. Although these 2 queries are out of the scope for this lecture, but still I am covering this so that you can refer to these 2 codes to do some hands-on practicing on self-join. So now I will remove this and we will see all the details from the newly created student table. So as you can see, the first column is student ID, then we have the name for each and every student, and then we have a buddy ID column, and each and every value from the buddy ID column is actually referencing to a value in student ID column. For example, this student with student ID 1, Steve Smith, has a buddy ID 3, which means the student with student ID 3 is the buddy for Steve Smith. And let's say using this information, I want to use an SQL join to join the student table with itself on the columns student ID and buddy ID. And as an output, I want to see a table that will have only 2 columns. First will be name for each and every student, and second will be a buddy column that will contain the name of the buddy for against each and every student. So instead of this buddy ID, the final output will contain the name of each and every buddy. I understand at this moment this might sound a lot confusing to you, but once we go ahead and look at the syntax of self-join, concept will be absolutely clear too. Okay, there we go. And before I execute this query, let's have a breakdown to understand it properly. So as a first table, I'm using this student table as stu. Then I'm applying a join to the same table, but this time I'm referring to it as buddy. So both are the same table, but when I used it for the first time, I'm creating its alias as stu, and when I'm using it second time, I'm creating its alias as buddy. And then from these 2 tables, which are actually the same table physically stored on the computer, I'm saying give me stu.name, which is referencing to the name column from the first table, and then buddy.name, which is referencing to the name column of the second table. And remember, I am creating an alias for this buddy.name as buddy. Otherwise, we will get both these columns as name, and it will become very confusing to understand that which name column is coming from which table. And then I am applying this join on the student ID from the first table to the buddy ID on the second table. So this is student ID that I am using from the first table, and this is the buddy ID that I am using from the second table. But remember, both the tables are same. It is just that I have created 2 different alias. First is stu and second is buddy. So if we select this query and execute it, we will see the desired output. Now let's try to compare it against the original student table so that it makes more sense to us. So previously I had taken a snip of the original table, and let's look at its details. So Steven Smith has a buddy ID 3, which is referencing to Pat Cummins, and on the final output we can see Pat Cummins is a buddy with Steven Smith. Similarly, David Warner has a buddy ID 4, which is referencing to Nicola Carey, and over here as well we can see Nicola Carey is a buddy with David Warner. and so on. Prior to this lecture, we had seen how to apply different kind of joins on two different tables. But self-join helps you to join the same table with itself. And now, since we have already seen a practical demonstration of the syntax for self-join, let's try to understand some of its theory part. So self-join can be considered as a join of two copies of the same table. But remember that SQL does not really create a copy of the table before applying the join, but it works in a way as if it has created a copy, since we are creating two different areas for the same table, and using these two different areas, it applies a join that gives us this kind of output. So that is all for today's lecture. With this lecture, now we have covered the entire topic of join, and we have covered all different kind of joins. If you have not yet seen our lectures on inner join, outer join, left or right join, then you will get a link of this entire tutorial playlist within the description box, and over there you will be able to access the entire playlist where you can see all the different tutorials that we have uploaded related to the topic of SQL for data science. Thank you very much for your time today. See you in the next lecture.